Archaeologists from the University of Tel Aviv have used radiocarbon dating to pinpoint the arrival of domestic camels in the Middle East, and they say that this science directly contradicts the Bible's version of events. Camels are mentioned as pack animals in the biblical stories of Abraham, Joseph, and Jacob, Old Testament stories that historians peg between 2000 and 1500 BC. But the archaeologists from Tel Aviv University say camels weren't domesticated in Israel until centuries later, more like 900 BC. Ben, as a member of the tribe, how do you feel about this fight between science and religion?
No shit. I mean,
I know you don't say.
I mean, but
well,
it's
I knew where you were going with this.
It's nice. It's nice when science comes through. You know, one of the Mormons take an unfair degree of abuse because their nonsensical history is so easily disprovable to people who don't know ancient history. Like, we know Jesus didn't come over here on a boat.
I thought you were right here on a Tyrannosaurus Rex.
Right, that's not.
Oh yeah, I remember learning that in all of my seminary classes.
Right.
This is a T-Rex.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Indians aren't red-skinned because the gods smited them, right? Like
No,
that.
Indians are the lost tribes of Israel. You realize that,
I
right?
realize
That's what
it.
the Mormons
Right,
teach.
but the ones that are dark, because they had to explain those were smited.
Also-
those were the Nephites.
Also
or the,
black skin too.
Right,
That's
yeah,
really
well,
powerful.
Smiting
It's a
is
curse,
obviously
yeah.
going to color your skin.
So.
Yeah, smiting does that.
But the story, of course, what's unfair for the grief that the Mormons take in that regard is that it's really it's just more easily
Well,
disprovable.
but they were dumb enough to try and invent a religion that's in modern history.
Well, they weren't dumb. I mean, he was smart enough to invent a religion that enabled him to say, you know, I glanced into a hat and it turns out I can fuck 13-year-olds.
I should say, he was smart enough. His followers were dumb enough.
But I mean, but it's not that different than what we're talking about here. It's just it takes a little more science to disprove those stories too. And so yeah, here we know these stories weren't written, the stories were not written contemporaneously or even close. And so they're simply made up. They're not true.
And that's really all, well,
they're fables.
They are fables, but I would say, and I, personally believe that they're fables, especially the things that are in direct contradiction to the natural laws of science. But I think that all this really does prove or provide evidence for is that they were not told contemporaneously. Yeah. I don't think it really provides any evidence that they're fully untrue. No. It just provides evidence that people told these stories way after the fact, and they effed up all the details, which is so common.
Which is just what humans do. You're not going to, a story that's passed down, not written anywhere, and is told for 750 years is going to be wrong. Mm-hmm. And of course, it's generally, and eventually then, especially when they start getting told with a purpose.
Right. Exactly.
Right.
And
as
what we
opposed
do
to just regale their family members.
Is if I'm going to tell you a story about, the history of my grandfather's grandfather's grandfather, I'm probably going to add elements to that story that are common and familiar to myself. So, camels were used as pack animals much later. Those are going to make their way into the story for that very reason, because we are selfish creatures and we're very self-centered, and when we talk to people, we're going to introduce elements from our own lives.
And I've got another movie reference for you. Wasn't that the point of the movie 300, where they told this crazy story that was based in truth, but there really weren't giant monsters and two-headed beasts and...
Yeah, that was the story.
Wasn't that? I think there was a plot there, wasn't there?
I don't remember. The sequel was out.
I saw the billboard. That's why
next month. Yeah. Yeah, and there's no way that if camels showed up in about 900 BC, which is I think what they said, as opposed to 1500 to 2000 in the biblical stories where there are camels, like no one in 900 even like you say it. There's probably no even mischief there. They're not saying things that are. They're like, I don't know whether if they're here now. I presume they were here 1,000 years ago.
Yeah.
Right.
Like how the fuck did he get across the desert? He must have had a camel. I mean, that's that's how they told the story.
So are you guys saying that no believer, no literal believer, is going to look at the science and then go, all right?
Anybody who believes in a literal translation of the Bible, anybody who's a fundamentalist Christian, is already ignoring so much scientific evidence. This is just one more piece to throw on the pile.
That could...
This is not going to convince Ken Ham that Bill Nye was right. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, but but that said, as as religion, Pat Robertson this week was critical of Ken Ham.
Pat Roberson's been critical in the past. He said multiple times that if you believe in a literal translation of the Bible, you're just not doing it right, because there's no way the earth is 6,000 years old.
Yeah, so I mean, if Pat Robertson thinks you're extreme.
So that showed me to some extent that religion's future, which will still be vibrant and strong, it will just be it will be taking this as words to live by, but not the historical fact.
I agree. I mean, even religion is subject to evolution, and I think that what we're going to see in future generations is a much looser adaptation of these books and a much more educated approach to religion. You know, we're going to look to the theologians and we're going to say, okay, these are stories, these are parables. Like you said, they're words to live by. It happened in a pre-scientific era, and science just doesn't apply to most of these stories.
But don't worry, they'll still hate gays.
Hallelujah!
Don't
Praise Jesus!
Yeah.